afternoon, everybody, and welcome to June edition of our Care Partner Meetup. I'm Polly Dawkins, Executive Director of the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I'm really glad to be here with all of you and glad that you all are here with us today. We've got some really interesting topics lined up to talk about. I'd like to introduce Connie Carpenter Phinney. Welcome, Connie.
Hi, everyone. Happy June. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We've got a nice turnout today. I'm joined by my regular panelists, Pat Donahoo and Gail Gitin, who are also care partners or have been care partners. You know us if you're new to this discussion. Pat's wife, Sid, has had Parkinson's for more than a decade. And I think you're on the road right now, Pat. You're muted. I think we'd figure this out by now, Pat.
Well, she came in, the dog started barking. Anyway, yeah, I'm in Durango, Colorado.
All right. And Gail, you're coming to us from across the street from me in both.
Exactly. In rainy, sort of miserable Colorado.
Oh, well, the sun's out here. It's just if you want to know.
We're having spring rains for a week now, 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's been wet, but the wildflowers are happy. And joining us from, I think, Wisconsin is Judy Long, who has been a guest with us before. She's such a special person to all of us in the foundation. She's a font of information and just a kind and gentle soul, an interfaith chaplain who has experience working with people with Parkinson's disease as well as other neurological conditions, and is now a care partner herself. Judy, say hi to us.
Hi, everybody. It is such a joy to be here and see some familiar faces on the screen. I'm really happy to come here. I was with this group once before, maybe a year ago.
Yep.
And I've had other connections with Connie and with Polly, over time, But
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. It's a joy to be here. And I think you mentioned, did you just say that I was also a caregiver? I think you did.
Yeah.
And my husband does not have Parkinson's. He has Alzheimer's, which is progressing, sadly, expectedly, but sadly so. But many of the dementia-related issues are ones that I now live as well as know a lot about. So I don't know if that can be helpful in any way, but I thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, well, we know you have, empathy and for all of us humans, but also in the situation that we find ourselves in and you now find yourself in. I do have someone asking which city you're in Wisconsin, and I don't remember. Where are you?
I am in Appleton, Wisconsin. It's about 2 hours north of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And 2 hours northeast, I think, of Madison. My geography leaves a lot to be desired, but it's something like that.
And what I'm curious what brought you there, just on a side note, because you had been working with the University of San Francisco for a long while, and I think, did you go back there because of family and support for your husband?
Yes and yes. The answer is yes. Although there's not a lot of family here, not a lot of support, but more than there would be in California. We were in California for the last 45 years.
Oh.
So it was a big change, but Tom grew up about 10 miles from where we're living right now.
Okay.
And so it's more familiar to him. It's stuff that he grew up with, he's known all his life. And there's some family, it's not California to Minneapolis or California to Watertown, Wisconsin. It's a few hours away, which is doable.
But, this brings up an interesting question, right? Because many of us are faced with, where do we find our resources to help us? And what are we willing to do maybe to maximize our resources for ourselves and or provide more comfort to our person with Parkinson's? And so that's a very dramatic choice that you've made.
Thank you, Connie. Thanks for saying that. It was dramatic. Yeah. I will say this. From the time of diagnosis, and I don't know how much this is true for all the rest of you listening in, the first thing on my mind was, oh my gosh, what if something happens to me? what do we do? I don't want him to be scared. I don't want him to be alone.
Oh my God, I got goosebumps when you said that. That is so much a concern of mine. It's so front of mind.
It has been from day one. And I think that's so true for all of us. And it's not that easily resolved. If we're very blessed and lucky, we have family nearby, we have kids, we have siblings. Tom and I don't have a lot of that stuff, so I have to kind of figure it out. Also moving here, I didn't have there are a lot of friendly people in Wisconsin, but I didn't know them. So it takes time to get to know folks and get to know other caregivers. So I'll talk more later, I'm sure, but I do want to make a real big plug for the importance. This is not a luxury. I consider this a necessity, but the importance of really having a group of people that we can hang out with and find a way to get a little time out to be with. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you do that, Judy? And then maybe we can discuss how we do that ourselves. But that's so important to, especially when you've moved because of your husband and you have to find your own community or your own way to find that space for yourself. How have you done that, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. It's a good question. It's something I'd love for every one of us to explore and figure out. How have I done this? Let's see. So when I came here, well, first of all, I'm like lots of caregivers. Most of us, I feel like I'm fine. I can do this. I muscle through everything and think that's, it's like I'm the queen of suck it up. I can do that. And then somewhere you realize there was a time when Tom was going through a bad patch where he was, I guess the word they call it in Parkinson's and they call it in most neurologic illnesses, oh, this person is agitated. Well, agitation can take a lot of different shapes and forms. And this was due to a medication, didn't realize it was connected, but it had ramped that up to a very high degree, where one neurologist said, oh, well, that's kind of on the edge of psychosis. Whatever it was a lot. And I realized that I felt really alone. And what is it that makes us feel less alone? So there are lots of different ways I think that's worked for me. One way that I wouldn't undersell this, and again, it's going to depend for everyone listening on what your life is like in the own shape and form that it is for you. But I found it was really important for me to write a letter. I'd never done it before, to Tom's family and close friends. Big deal. Tell them, I mean, they all knew about his illness, but I hadn't said, this is how things are right now. I thought, oh my gosh, they're 3 hours away. No, they haven't stopped by to visit. It's been a year. And I thought, am I annoyed at that? Or am I just saying, I get it. They're young people with little kids. But I thought they will have no idea. They won't know what's happening. I need to let them know in a way that's coming from a place of kindness. It is not saying, shame on you, you haven't been here, but lets them know what's really going on. So I did that. Here's what surprised me. Just by writing that letter to people and having them even just text back, oh gosh, I see that's really hard. And it's nice to be in touch and we love you. Just that meant so much to me. I thought, why do I care that? I cared. I can just tell you, meant so much to me, still does. And I realized it's time to do it again. Another way that I've done this.
And let's just stop 1 second. I want everyone to do this. This is your homework assignment. Because we do talk about this too, and it's impossible for the people around, even close to us to understand what you're dealing with, right? Much less those that are a little further afield. And mostly, I think it's human nature, Judy, I might be wrong, but that to just want to assume and hope and pray that that person is okay. and it puts them at ease, but to let them know, in fact, these are my struggles. And I really feel it's important for me to keep you up to date on this. Really widened your circle, didn't it? I can see that.
It helps so much. And I did write at the beginning, I said, I know I like to tell you the good things that are happening. I said, I don't usually say the other stuff, but I realized I want to and then I went from there. That mattered. And I also included in it some things that if they felt, I had to really, I struggled with the wording because I didn't want to say you should do this or you should do that. But I gave them a couple of ideas of things they could do. Most didn't, but a couple did. And I think it was really good for them. And it made me feel more open in terms of connecting with them. I felt after that I could reach out again and they would know what I'm talking about a little bit. And it's been 6 months. I did that in November. Tom was diagnosed in 2018. I did that November of 24.
Oh, wow.
Right. I should know better, but nope, I didn't do it. Everything was fine. I was fine. It meant so much to me. And I'm realizing, guess what? There's been a lot of changes in 6 months. Is that true for any of you, caregivers, fellow caregivers? I need to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to find a way. So
that was one step, and that was an important step. And then
can we ask a couple of questions that people have about your letter? Another Judy asks, can you address how to write that letter without feeling that you are betraying your partner's privacy?
I'm just smiling because I was going to crack a joke and say, oh, it never crossed my mind. Of course, we all think that, right? I don't have a pat answer for that. I know that it concerned me. I worried about it because I thought too, putting up a Caring Bridge page. Why not? I did it when I had surgery once. It would have been a nice thing to do. I kept putting it off, and I finally wrote this letter. But I think it could be on Caring Bridge just as easily, or lots of helping hands. And if you're not familiar with those apps, folks, it's a way of just communicating with your community about what's happening, and they can participate in it or not. I don't know. I really don't have a pat answer for it, but I had to stop and think what would be respectful to the person that I love and still be, would still communicate clearly what I thought people would like and want to know.
Yeah.
But I did not copy my husband on it. He's not reading emails now. And I don't know if that's true for a lot of your people, probably are very cognitively more intact than Tom is. So I didn't have to worry about him reading it. And I could say, I didn't go into dreadful detail, but I was able to say things that these are the kinds of things that we're doing now that Tom is doing. These are the things he doesn't do. He needs to have more often. I tried to approach it from that perspective, but it's going to be I believe it's going to have to be an individual thing that you'll have to struggle with a bit and discern. I will say I didn't write the letter in one sitting, and I did not send it after I wrote it. So I definitely would say very important not to push the send button until you've had time to sit with it and look at it again and go, I don't really want to say it quite that way, or this is not the way I want to communicate. Also, I think it's important to not come from a place of resentment. It's hard not to come from a place of resentment if you feel resentful. So it's really helpful to get to a place, however you do it, whether it's taking a few deep breaths, or if you're a meditator, maybe it's meditating or taking a long walk in the woods, whatever helps you kind of settle your mind a little bit and see if you can write from a place of ease if you can.
Yeah. Can I add something, Polly, before you ask another question? Because I've seen this recently with a friend of mine whose great aunt, her aunt was needing to be moved to a dementia care center. And she lived in northern Idaho. My friend lives here in Boulder. And her cousin reached out to her and asked if there was any way she could help. And I would say my friend, who almost says no to nothing, she says yes to everybody that asks for help. But I thought she should say no because she'd had so much on her plate. But you know what? She went up and helped her aunt move. her partner came with her with a truck, and they did all of this, and it was just goodness of the heart. And you never know until you ask someone what they're willing to do for you. And the first step is asking, right? I mean, I found her response phenomenal, and I don't know that I would have done the same in her situation, but I thought that she and her partner were just incredible throughout. And so I think that the fact that you're starting to let them know, even after all this time, that at least there may be somewhat at the ready, the ones that would be willing to drop everything and help.
And I believe it's a kindness to include people. And I think we forget that. We're so used to saying, I'm okay, I don't need. I think it's a kindness that she allowed them to help, and then that they did. But that inclusivity is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, wow. What a great point. What other questions are we getting, Polly?
Yeah, I think you might have answered this, but yet another Judy, a third Judy has asked the question. Has anything come of that letter? Have you gotten more continuous support?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, not yet. I don't know what I will get. One of our nieces said, "Oh, how about if we have a FaceTime conversation? I will call you once a month." Actually, first she said every week, and then I said, "Does that sound cool?" She said that once a month, which actually is good for us too. And I know second Sunday at 3:30 Central Time, we're going to get to talk with Tori, and sometimes she'll be there are 3 nieces that all live within 5 miles of each other. Sometimes she'll be at one of the other kids' homes, and we'll see the kids and their kids. And Tom loves it. It's fun. And I know we can count on it. They all came by one time as well. That whole group was going to something in Green Bay, which is just north of us, to play brass instruments at Christmas time. There's something called a tuba festival. They were going to it. They said, "Can we stop by?" They had never been here. It'd been a year and a half. They came in, 8 of them. Right, and we live in an apartment now in senior housing. They all walked in. They played wildly. The kids played wildly with the dog. Tom loved every minute of it. Everybody took a long nap, but that happened because of that. I'm like,
wow.
We had, and it doesn't happen all the time, but that happened, and I'm glad. Another niece, I had suggested, how about sending, how people send Christmas cards they have made by Snapchat or some of those apps that I don't know how to use. I said, what if you send us a little picture book with a few pictures in it? Because that's something I thought my husband would like. You could turn the pages, and nothing happened for a while. And then one of them sent a booklet for the whole family of Tom's father, mother, the aunts and uncles and cousins, pictures of many of them. Loves it, looks at it over and over again. And then realize too that I don't know how, but I can ask the kids to help me put something together so that I can make a few smaller ones with perhaps just 5 pages in each booklet. One for the Wisconsin Longs, one's for the Minneapolis Red Sox, whatever it is. I think it will be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Thought of something else. So I'm sorry, Polly, were there others that you wanted to?
So this is Sharon asks, it's not really a question, it's a statement. She said, "My partner doesn't want anyone to know he's struggling. It's so isolating for me." Do you have any thoughts for her?
Isolating for both of them, isn't it?
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. It's a good concern. Yeah. People get very embarrassed about their symptoms. They get embarrassed that they have an illness that impacts or erodes their autonomy in any way. We're all like that to some degree. I can be that way. If I were talking to someone as a chaplain one-on-one, what I would do is talk a lot about why it matters to let other people in, why it's good for them, just like we were just saying, and why it's good for us. Now it's heart open for us. It's a kindness. It's allowing. Sometimes it's enough to say to someone, "How would you feel if your brother or sister or best friend had an illness like this and they wouldn't let you know anything? How would you feel?" And sometimes that helps people. Sometimes it doesn't, but it's one way to look at it. it's very freeing to let people know. You can stop worrying about what other people think more. And the example I often give is a personal one, so usually it'll work better than if it's not personal. But I have a balance disability. Connie, I don't know if you might remember that, but it's from when I had some surgery or a heart illness 25 years ago, but it knocked out my vestibular system. So I don't have Parkinson's, but my balance is terrible. Mostly I've adapted visually, so you might, and muscularly. I was giving a talk once for some neurologists at UCSF, and I was reaching for something in my handbag. I fell off my chair, right? So if I start to fall, I just go down. So that's what I did. I started laughing. I thought it was hilarious. Here I'm in a room with all these neurologists, and I fell on the floor. And Maya, Maya Katz, some of you, she wasn't at that meeting. She was on the phone with us because she had to be somewhere at the time. And she was horrified. I was sitting there laughing. But somehow, usually when I'm giving a talk, like when I would give a talk in person to people at Stanford, I would let them know up front about my balance disability so they wouldn't be alarmed if I needed to hold on to the lectern or if I was a little bit stumblefoot about things. And it made them all much more comfortable when anything happened. It made me more comfortable. I didn't have to worry about taking care of them or worry about their reaction. And it could be something that we all held lightly. It's a lot easier than trying to hide it. So generally, I'll approach it from that aspect. It may not work with your person. I don't know. I tried to convince an older Chinese man in San Francisco after he got oxygen. He was on a pulmonary palliative care clinic. He had to wear oxygen. But he liked playing cards with his buddies in Golden Gate Park, but he stopped going. He was embarrassed to go out with the oxygen. Didn't want them to see it. And I tried to convince him. I said, "You're teaching them it's okay to be out in public."
Yeah.
And he just looked at me, he'd crack up and start laughing. He says, "I'm not going." I mean, what do you know?
I think that the roadblock here is pride for so many, right? And that's a hard one to overcome. It's not shameful, and to your point, if you can confer with someone one-on-one and have that conversation, it might open their thinking a little bit. But in general, I think nobody wants to be seen as so fallible, and Parkinson's is such a complicated disease that I think I'm seeing a little bit of that in the chat, the resistance to change and the resistance to doctor's orders or suggestions. And, for me, it's like safety first, right? So the fact that you're telling people, Judy, about your vestibular, disability is good for you, because if somebody will be more quick to give you a hand if they know this situation is there.
I've never thought of it that way. I'm sure that's true. Although I have said, if we're walking somewhere on uneven ground, is it okay with you if I put my hand on your shoulder or grab your elbow? So there is that. But
it is humbling, isn't it? It's humbling, right?
But I find it very freeing to talk about it out loud. Makes me feel more, I feel much more comfortable if I can do that than if I can't.
Mm-hmm. If someone were really resistant to that, which I think we're seeing a little bit of, how would you counsel them?
Yeah, I would counsel them the way I've just been talking with all of you. And you may have noticed, I'm not trying to say, you have to do this. You have to change. Just like the elderly Chinese man, all I can do is share what I think might be helpful. And he's got to make his own decisions. And but I feel compelled to respect him, to let him do what he feels is right for him. As I say when I'm teaching even a simple skill like a grounding skill, I say, I don't know if this will work for you. I'm not inside your mind and heart and body. You're the only one that knows that. So you decide what works for you.
Yeah. Huh.
And I might bring it up again later and say, what do you think now?
I want to ask if Pat and Gail want to jump in, or Polly, then I'll let you see what we're missing in the chat. You guys have some thoughts?
I know that my husband was perfectly willing to tell people or let them know that he had Parkinson's, but I was the opposite. I really didn't want to have anyone come to me and say, "How's Gene? How's Gene? How's he feeling? How are you doing?" I didn't want those constant reminders. So I tried to hide it. The joke is that people came to me anyway and said, I'm noticing Jean doesn't look so good. So though I was trying to hide it and spent a lot of energy dancing around the problem, I was only kidding myself. So it was for sure a help once they all realized it. It just some of my responsibility for hiding what was going on was alleviated, and it was much more, when he started drooling, instead of trying to do everything to cover it up, it just happened. And so it was easier, and I could talk to them and they can talk to me. And at the beginning, sure, it's always how's Jean? But after a while, those questions stop, so you don't have to have that constant reminder that things were not normal.
Yeah,
Pat, what about you?
we've since the beginning. I mean, in the beginning, Cindy wasn't real open with it and everything. But shortly after she told the people she worked with about it, then she got more understanding of what her challenges were at work. But in general, we're very open with our challenges and everything. We were just in an RV park in Kanab, Utah, this past few days ago, and we met a couple, and it just created conversation. They asked about, she has that new pump, and it looks like a little diabetes pump, and she told them that she has Parkinson's disease, and then they just started a whole new conversation. We found out they lived right less than a mile from our house in Vegas. So it's and so we kind of made new friends. We played the video. I mean, we played the song for them. They wanted to hear the song, and the Care Partner song we did last month. And so everywhere we go, it's important for us anyway, as ambassadors, especially since we're representing and advocating for people with Parkinson's, that we just be open with it. And the challenges, though, were not so forthcoming on all the time, but when people ask, I'm not afraid to tell them, sometimes, things suck, but they really do. But at the same time, I can also say that things are great. Things are great, but sometimes they're not. And we have to be willing to understand that. And, we're on our trip right now, and we've learned that, we've been getting ready for it for the past 3 or 4 months. And we're a week into it, and we're saying, maybe we bit off more than we can chew. And so we're in the midst of maybe adjusting, or we weren't going to be home until the end of July. We might be home in the middle of July now, and may even take a flight to where we were planning on going. And
But that's important too, right? We have to know how to pivot. So I think it takes a lot of courage sometimes to pivot when you have made plans. And as a school teacher, you really value your summer, and so you make plans, and then this happens. Let me interrupt just for a second to ask Judy to reflect on. You told us about writing the letter, and then you were going to get to second point. I interrupted because I really wanted to lean into that letter and really emphasize that. But I think you had another point of something that you did kind of in a stepwise progression.
Yeah, I did, but I want to remember a point that we were just talking about. Oh, I know what it was. I'll just bring this up briefly. I'm not sure how much this applies, but I do know at one point I had to have surgery when I was in my late 40s. I was working full time. I didn't want to tell anyone. It's heart surgery. It wasn't anything, secret, right? I didn't want to tell anyone. So I told my husband don't go around and tell anybody. I told my brother, he's a doctor, right? I told a few people, but that's it. I don't want you to go run around telling people. And I felt a little like, it's a little bit like you were, Gail, although it was for myself. I didn't want people asking me, are you okay? How are you? And I didn't realize until after the whole thing was over with, thankfully it was successful, except for the balance. It came around the same time, that I was cutting my husband off from contact with others by doing that. It didn't occur to me. When I realized that, I thought that was such a mistake. And it was so hard for him to be isolated just because I felt like I didn't want a lot of people to know. And so I had the chance to correct it because I had heart surgery again in 2018. I made sure I told everyone in the world I had a Caring Bridge site, and Tom loved it. He was connected with people. There were people supporting him, people that came and visited him. It was great. It was so good for him. He's a very social guy, has always been all his life, much more so than I am. I like silent meditation retreats. That's not for him. He wants to run with a crowd. He wants to run literally, but he wants to have friends out there running with him. So cutting him off from others was not okay. And I just think that's worth noticing with you and your person. How are you normally, and what are the things that will serve? The other things I wanted to mention, gosh, there's a book I want to mention for those of you struggling with dementia, if that's some aspect of the Parkinson's that you're working with. There's a book that's called Dementia-Friendly Communities, Why We Need Them and How We Can Create Them, by Susan McFadden. You can put it in one of your things you send to people if you wish.
We'll do that for sure.
But it's so filled with wonderful ways that we can be without the stigma and with community and active in community. It's a wonderful book. I think it's quite groundbreaking. There's another book that has to do with communications, and this may not, I know how, as Connie said earlier, I worked in a neuropalliative care clinic for people with advanced Parkinson's and related disorders. So I'm used to the kinds of communications, things that can get in the way. But there's nonetheless a book by a woman named Ann Basting, Basting, called Creative Care. And it's got a subtitle, something like Revolutionary Approach to Working with People with Elderly People and People with Dementias. But that too is an extraordinary book. So setting those aside, but I wanted to mention Susan's because it talked about community. And I happen to be living in Appleton, Wisconsin, where Susan lives. And because of her, there are programs here that I didn't see them in San Francisco. There are a lot more care programs here, a lot more normalization of dementia here than, it's not perfect here. It's not perfect anywhere, but it's more commonly understood that it's how we live in this world, how we're going to be with people in our libraries, in our police force, in our schools, in our hospitals. And I just think it's such important stuff to consider. How can we be advocates for it and help it to happen more? The other thing that I'm feeling very personally right now is making some friends that are caregivers. And some of it's the luck of who I've bumped into. Yes, I'm in one caregiver support group while my husband was it happened simultaneous while Tom was in a daycare program. I could be in the support group twice a month. Then when Tom's dementia advanced too much and he couldn't be in that program anymore, I couldn't go. I couldn't go to the care group. I didn't think I cared about care groups. Let me tell you, the minute it was cut off, it was like, oh my gosh, this does not feel good. It's not okay. And really, in a big way, much more so than I expected. I guess you're getting the point. I don't get any of these things till they slap me in the face. But it really got me thinking about it and how important it is. Some of the people that I met through that, I've stayed in touch with. We get together occasionally, but for me personally, the big issue was I no longer, and I haven't for some time, I no longer feel comfortable leaving my husband by himself. That means I need to have a caregiver of some kind. Has to be someone that Tom will tolerate. Nowadays, he'll tolerate things more easily than he would a year ago, but it has to be someone that feels okay to you both. Has to be someone I can afford. If you have long-term care and you're still at home, both of you, then hopefully it covers that kind of care. If not, right now, I'm paying for it out of pocket because we're in an assisted living facility right now. Tom's living with me in the same apartment. I need care help. It's out of pocket. So I've got to think about those things. What's probably what works for me and what's the person like and what do they know about the condition that Tom has and what he's dealing with. How good are they at it? I can get a person, but having someone that knows what they're doing is a very different thing. One of the caregivers that I mentioned she said, this is not okay. We need to have a group. And she calls the group the hummingbirds, because you feel like we're always flapping our wings and trying to get a lot of stuff done. And she arranged a retreat for the hummingbirds this coming Thursday at a beautiful, it's like a state park on the edge of a big lake. I don't know what we're going to do there. Apparently we're going to do some qigong and some journaling, reflecting, but just I'm paying out of pocket for a caregiver the whole day long. I've never done that, not once, not ever. This is a big deal for me. I'm really excited, but I'm just as excited to be with other people that are living a similar journey, even when it's different, right? One of my
Judy, where did you find those people then? Were they in a registry of
No, I actually met them by being in a, I mentioned that Appleton's big on a lot of dementia care programs. So
Yeah.
Tom was, when I was in the group that was the support group, I met a few of those people, and I've seen one or two of them since then as I've looked for other programs or places I could take Tom that were more suited for him. I've bumped into them here and there. And one or two of us said, well, let's get together for lunch sometime. I said, I can't, because I didn't have a caregiver. And then I said,
Yeah.
well, this day Tom has something he does, and I could meet you for a half hour at a cafe. And, you know,
Yeah.
little by little, I got to know a few people, and it was one of them that said, well, sadly, her husband just died of, on top of dementia that was pretty far advanced, he got ALS. I mean, you know, crazy. You know,
wow.
so it's fun. But she's the one who organized it.
A lot of people are asking about the books, and I'm looking up the one that Susan McFadden wrote, so we'll put that in there, but it's Dementia Friendly Communities is the title.
Yeah, and the subtitle is something like Why We Need Them and How We Can Create Them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Susan McFadden. What was the second one? I didn't catch that second one.
Second one, what's on my shelf? It's the big title before the subtitle is Creative Care.
Okay, Creative Care. Okay.
By Anne Basting, Basting.
Okay.
To give you a little of their background, Susan was a psychology professor at the University of Wisconsin. She's now emerita, whatever, a lady that's retired and is one of those. And her specialty was gerontology. And so she became very interested in the entire field of aging and various kinds of neuro conditions that often accompany it. And she's done incredible work with that. Anne Basting I don't know if she still is, a professor at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, but recently moved to Atlanta. Her husband works in high tech, whatever it was, they moved to Atlanta. Okay. So I don't know if she's still with them. But it's an incredible book. Some of the things in it are way over the top in terms of anything I would ever do, because they are big creative programs that you'd have to be an Anne Basting to put them together or know someone like her. But the reason I read it initially, why I wanted to read it, was the way that she focused on communication skills with someone who has impaired cognitive functioning for whatever reason, whether it's memory loss or executive function. And in Parkinson's, I see more with executive function loss. But she talks about situations where she was visiting nursing homes, which is way more advanced. But nonetheless, it's how do you communicate in ways that do not shut the other person down? And I just think her work is incredible. I strongly recommend both books. But I read it for the communications. I loved reading all of it. It was fun, but it was the communications that was.
That looks, both of those look really helpful. And I think we're always looking for ways to better communicate or better understand, what's happening in front of us. And it looks like it would also help in that letter to your family, in terms of these are ways you might try, to communicate. And,
And I did say that in my letter. I said, if you decide you want to call, if you really want to know what's happening, don't ask that question when you're on FaceTime with both of us. You're never going to find out. I mean, if you want to talk to me personally, I'm happy to. But if you want to know, I tell that to neurologists too. If you actually want to know, don't Now I have met caregivers that will say anything in front of a person, but most of them, if they're in the same room, they don't tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Unless things are going so well that it's easy to say. But if it's something that's hard, usually people are comfortable. I don't want to make my person feel hurt or uncomfortable or like I'm dissing or whatever it is.
Yeah,
So,
and I've struggled, and I think many of us have when we are in those appointments and we do try to broach the topic of executive function and some of the issues that are before us, that sometimes the neurologist can be very dismissive. I've had that happen to me, and we have
of all
we have changed neurologists.
good. So whenever I'm teaching neurologists, I always feel sorry for them in a way in that they're exquisitely trained, but they're not trained in this sort of stuff that they really need to know. But I do try to tell them, I say, if it's humanly possible, and in a big hospital like the one I was in, they are really time limited in how much time they can spend with people, unless they happen to be a palliative care specialist, then they get to spend time. But I say, your caregivers are your best feet on the ground. If you want to know what's happening, find a way to trade off with your nurse or with your psychologist, with your chaplain or social worker. So you say, oh, for 5 minutes, you're going to go be with the nurse. She's going to take your vitals. And I always meet with the caregiver while we're doing that. And I try to reassure them. I say, you can just spend 10 minutes with them, but don't not do it. Do it, and ask them how they are while you're at it. Yeah,
This is so important. And also just to say, it's not a betrayal of your person. We obviously are trying to put our person forward in the best possible light at almost all times, not all times, but, and I think that, it's not a betrayal to confront what is challenging for us as care partners, because you never know where that might help. And you referenced this early on with your husband with medications that made him agitated. And I think so often with a person with Parkinson's, this is also an outcome of when you have a medication change, and the caregiver sometimes is under informed about what they should be looking for, and then are afraid to reach out or don't have the HIPAA releases, so that the privacy releases in place, which are so important. And I know people are resistant sometimes to do that, but it's really the only way we can do the best job we can, that possible, is to have that access and just to be honest with each other. You aren't going to hurt your person by being honest, although it sometimes feels like you're betraying them because they've asked you maybe not to talk about something, and that's just not fair to you, which is also, it's not fair to you to be isolated as well. Judy, while I'm listening to you, I must tell you that I think your next community is going to come from working with some writing groups and starting to write down some of this wonderful advice and your life experiences, because I do think what you've experienced in your professional practice as an interfaith chaplain, and what you're experiencing now wow, you are so important to us. I'm cherishing every word that's coming out of your mouth. I'm so appreciative.
I just want to say something about sharing with a doctor. I think it's very unfair to the physician if you keep some of this information to yourself. They can't do their job if you're not sharing. My husband, when he was an intern, he would have a patient come in, and the patient would look at him. My husband would look at the patient. So, and my husband would say, what's bothering you? And the patient would say, well, you're the doctor, you tell me. So it's like, it's sort of like the same thing. You're going to a doctor that you want to have the whole picture. And if you're hiding things from them because you don't want to, embarrass your husband or go against his wishes, that's being very ingenuous to the physician. You wouldn't want, if you're, let's say, a nursery school teacher or any kind of teacher, you wouldn't want to know that there's a parent that's hiding some major aspects of their behavior and life from you, so that you know how to react to it and do a proper job.
If I could tack on to that, and thank you so much for what you're saying. It's so important. I almost forgot to mention that some of my fellow caregivers have said, actually when I was back in San Francisco, that they routinely my chart before a visit.
Yeah.
They will my chart their if not
Mhm.
their, and in one case it was I always my chart the social worker who will always tell the doc this is important and you need to talk about this or look at
Right.
this something. But it's sort of giving the neurologist a heads up in advance of the meeting of things that are concerns to you
Or email, if you can email him to the office
Yeah.
before you get there with a heads up.
I want to make another comment that we've been so fortunate to have experienced, which is that and this is for everybody, when you are, if and when you're shopping around for another doctor, even a family care physician, so your primary care physician, our primary care physician is in the same office as our neurologist, and they are linked. As
No.
along with the cardiologist, and Davis has needed all of these. So the my chart is not only linked, but they do talk to each other. And
I
it
love
is
that.
so miraculous. My husband just had his checkup last week with his, annual checkup, and he brought up a few things. And then last night he's on the phone and I said, who are you talking to? And it was the PA in the neurology practice who had just had a conversation with Davis's primary care physician. Now, this is the goal. This is the goal in life, is to have them communicating with each other so that you're not, everybody's not siloed. And unfortunately, with the way our medicine normally is, that's normally the case, right? And I just can't tell you how grateful I am for our current situation. And I would encourage people to try to get your doctors talking to each other, because it is so important, And I also want to make one other plug, because it is summer and I want your people wearing sunscreen. One of those little known facts about people with Parkinson's is that they lose their capacity to be protected from the sun. And we just got news that Davis has to have 2 areas with Mohs surgery
Mohs.
because of, his, inability to, his skin, he wears a lot of sunscreen, but we've all had a lot of sun exposure through our life. And I just want to remind you, and with everything else that you have going on and all the doctor appointments, not to forget the dermatology appointment. And, stay on top of it, because it is so important. And it's a little known fact about people with Parkinson's having this kind of weakness that comes out specifically from having Parkinson's. My plug. I just wanted to remember to say that.
And I want to remember to just tack on one thing that one of the docs I work with, who runs a palliative care clinic for people with cancer. But he said, yeah, and cancer and caregivers can get in a lot of trouble. And I said, you mean they should walk around the block, Mike? Is that what you're trying to say? He said, no, they should keep their own doctor appointments. The caregivers don't go to their own appointments because they don't have time or they can't get a caregiver to cover.
Yeah.
They don't go and they let things go. I thought of it when you mentioned.
Dear Judy, this applies to you too.
Yeah, I know. But it's good advice for us to be reminded of that. We don't generally get that advice. We get the other kind of advice.
Yeah.
For us to go to the doctor, we think, oh, that's another thing I have to add to my list. When is this list ever going to end? Well, people, it won't end. So you get used to it. You'll never get to the bottom of your list. So take a deep breath and know that that's just the way it's always going to be. Always. So make your doctor's appointment and put that at the top of the list, and don't go to the next one, because I do know people who put things off and they ran into trouble, more trouble than they would have had before. And that just exacerbates the problem. Exactly. Whatever that word is. Okay.
Exacerbates. Okay, we only have 5
Exacerbates.
minutes left, and I'm wondering if Judy has something else she wants to add. And I know we did have a question going into today's topic, which we haven't gotten to, Polly. We might have to wait, but
No problem.
Judy, what have we missed?
I think having this conversation is amazing. So thank you. Thank you, Polly, for making it happen. And thank you, Connie, big time for making this happen. And Pat and Gail, just for being here, and Annie for helping me get online. So a big thank you, a big shout out. But the importance of community, of having these conversations, of staying connected through all of it. I think I put that right up at the top of my list for the most important thing you can do.
Mhm.
And I'll say to you what my friend Mary taught me to say to her son, who was in the Marines: thank you for your service to every one of you caregivers. Truly, you know,
Yeah.
and to remember that doing something for someone you care about actually benefits us. It doesn't make it less hard, but it really benefits us, not only emotionally, but biologically. Isn't that interesting? There's studies that show that. So appreciate that and enjoy it. Yeah.
So Judy, I think we need to have you back more frequently, so you can expect that we are part of your extended community, and we will invite you back hopefully sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Connie. I've loved this. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
It's super helpful to our community to feel like they're understood and seen and heard in a way that sometimes we forget, you know, we forget that others share our experience and have different ways of phrasing it. Sometimes it's, you know, I always say, being a former elite endurance athlete, that the breath is where I get my, you know, return to grounding and you know, center myself. But really, it's also just the understanding of other people, and that can ground us too, to know that others, it's not that we suffer together, we just understand each other, you know, in a way that is difficult to articulate. I really appreciate everyone being here, taking the time to be here.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, my joy. Thank you.